Hi, thank you for joining. In today's video, I've got something a little different. It might be a little controversial in some people's minds, but others might see it as a good alternative to enjoy these vintage watches that, well, are just getting harder and harder to keep running now. So please stick around and let me know what you think. This is what you normally find in a vintage Timex. I've talked about these old typical Timex movements before in the video where I service the Timex 400, which is a very different movement than these typical M movements. As I mentioned in that video, you can take these apart. The official Timex documentation actually recommends more or less leaving these assembled and cleaning fully assembled. You remove the dial and movement from the watch case. The dial, there are 3 prongs that you pry off rather than typical dial feet screws. And then you essentially dunk this in a cleaning solution, dry and lubricate very sparingly and reassemble. I have had some success following that procedure, but I would say it is very hit or miss. I hazard to even give an estimate. At least 50% failure rate where the movements just don't run reliably. They might run fine one position or another, or just run for a period of time. Sometimes they run great, they're just not made, well, in my opinion, not made for extreme durability or serviceability, of course. And it makes sense. I mean, they were the Swatch of their day. You could pick these up really cheap, just about anywhere. So they're very affordable, and they really just made more sense to replace than to keep putting money and effort into. And that said, the cases also really weren't of the highest quality. They tend to pit. This one is actually not horrible, but it's actually much newer. I want to say this case might be from, I don't know, maybe even the 80s. This one, however, the case is better than a lot that I've seen, but there is some corrosion here from that case material. I have seen some in such bad condition that I would be afraid to wear. They just look like they'll just crumble just from the stress of wearing. But this one is not terrible. There are some cracks in this acrylic crystal that I will eventually replace. This is just kind of a work in progress right now. I think this dial, even though it has, it definitely has some aging on it, some aging spots, we'll say. But you can still see a little bit of that that sunburst sort of pattern. I think it's still a beautiful dial, even with its patina. And I hate to see these watches just languish. You can find these movements running, but typically, they're getting shucked out of a working watch, which that just doesn't feel right either. I've actually tried servicing these. They've only kind of been a partial success. I suspect what happens, because these are metal on metal, these are not jeweled, that things start to kind of wear to the tolerances where they're just not going to run consistently. It is amazing though that some still do run, especially for as inexpensively as these were produced. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'd been thinking about these watches and just how much it bothered me that they often languish because they're not running. The parts are becoming more and more scarce. It occurred to me, there are a lot of these very, very inexpensive quartz watches, flea markets and thrift stores that have these very inexpensive quartz movements in them. And they're not too far off from the size of these movements. And there's plenty of room in these cases usually. So yeah, you might have noticed already that 1 second tick in this 1963. It's a very similar size movement to, what's in these vintage Timexes. And actually there's a lot more room in the case, just like in this quartz case here. You can see that spacer there. There's a lot more room in this case as well. I'm gonna see if I can pop this open on camera. Maybe this is heresy. I would be curious to know what your thoughts are. I of course, I don't think I could bring myself to do this to a working watch. I mean, a watch with a working movement. But as a solution, an alternative to appreciate a watch that might otherwise be languishing, I don't know. What do you guys think? I'll tell you, this has been far more accurate than any of these M series movements I've ever encountered. And the stem height actually is at least close enough to work. Now, I don't have the perfect solution just yet. There is a little bit of pull, a little bit of play when I pull the stem out. It does spring back. Yeah, but this spacer works pretty well in this case. And I did add a little bit of padding here on the case back. That's just some double stick tape where I left the strip of plastic there on that one side so that it wouldn't stick to the movement. While I do miss that mechanical beat of more ticks per second, I can appreciate the reliability, the accuracy. I think I paid $1 for that Quartz watch. Add a crystal, that'd be a few dollars. So I don't know, is this something that you think that we should consider more of? Again, I don't want to do this to a working watch. I know some people have done that, but that's, I just don't know that that's for me. So this is a little bit along the lines of a Restomod philosophy, like they do with cars, like maybe a vintage muscle car, or a vintage Ford Bronco, or a vintage Toyota J. You know, they put a modern power plant or upgrade the brakes to something that's a little bit more contemporary. Some people may find it acceptable, some people may hate it, some people might roast me for it. But again, this was not a working watch, and this was one way to get this watch back in action without, you know, being detriment to other watches. So really, don't hold back. Let me know what you think in the comments. Keep your eyes out. I might try this a little more. Until then, be well.